Good afternoon, dear Minister, Excellencies, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. Also, good afternoon to all the persons who are following us online via our streaming. I'm particularly happy to welcome you this afternoon for our public lecture, Permanent Neutrality, the Foreign Policy of Costa Rica, and I'm particularly delighted to have such a distinguished speaker who could best speak about foreign policy than the Foreign Minister. So thank you, Minister, for having accepted this invitation, and welcome to the Diplomatic Academy here in Vienna. Dr. Arnoldo André Tinoco has a long experience in international affairs. I will just give you a little bit of his background. He is a lawyer, one could say, has a law degree and notary public degree from the University of Costa Rica. Also a doctor degree, Doctor of Law from the University of Hamburg, magna cum laude, speaks perfectly German. Wir können also auch in Deutsch sprechen im Prinzip. And has a degree of the Institute of INCAE in cooperation with Georgetown University on the legal aspects of international business. He started in 1994 as a professor of international law at the University of Costa Rica. There he taught 10 years in international law, so he has really experience also in theory and all the details. In 2007, he was appointed by the President of Costa Rica as international arbitrator for the free trade agreement between the Republic of Costa Rica and the Republic of Chile. He worked 3 years as president of the Costa Rican Chamber of Commerce, and during 25 years he was the honorary consular general of Norway in Costa Rica. In 2008, he was founding partner of the law firm Lexicon Corp in Costa Rica, and exercised as lawyer many, many years. And 2 years ago, on the 8th May 2022, he was appointed Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship of the Republic of Costa Rica. So thank you very much. I will pass now the floor to the Minister for his talk, and then we will follow with questions. I will start with a few questions, and then I will give the floor to you. And I hope that our students will also start with the kickoff, and we will have a nice exchange. If that's fine, thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Ich bin sehr geehrt, hier sein zu dürfen und Ihnen zu begrüßen. Excellencies, dear students, visitors, ambassadors, and visiting people per virtual systems. As the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Costa Rica, it is my honor to share with you today about the foreign policy of my country, and particularly about its permanent neutrality. As we delve into this subject, you will uncover the unique journey of the first nation in the world that took the brave decision to abolish its armed forces on a unilateral and voluntary basis, and that has managed to establish itself as an inspiration of democracy and prosperity in Latin America, despite facing numerous challenges, including limited resources and regional instability. Please allow me to start with this lecture by mentioning a few words about the foundation of democracy in Costa Rica. Then I will refer to the basis of our foreign policy and reflect on the nature, characteristics, and implications of the self-imposed neutrality status. Foundations of the democracy. Costa Rica's democracy traces back to its independence from Spanish colonial rule in 1821. Unlike some of our neighbors, Costa Rica experienced relatively little political turbulence, laying the groundwork for stable governance. After our declaration of independence, Costa Rica's journey is marked by significant milestones. In 1848, Costa Rica embraced democracy, transitioning into a republic with a presidential model and a tripartite division of powers. This commitment to democratic governance was further solidified in the late 1840s with the declaration of free public education, reflecting the nation's commitment to social well-being. Notably, in 1877, Costa Rica abolished the death penalty, becoming the third country globally to do so, after Venezuela and San Marino. The establishment of direct voting in 1913 paved the way to broader citizen participation in the political process. During the 1940s, Costa Rica made significant strides in promoting social rights, leading to the enactment of the Labor Code and the establishment of the Costa Rican Social Security Fund. In a landmark move for gender equality, the nation granted women the right to vote in 1949. Also, a very significant milestone in Costa Rica's democratic journey was the decision to abolish the army in 1948, following a brief civil war of 2 months. This bold move allowed Costa Rica to reallocate resources towards education, healthcare, and social programs. I will come back to this matter later on in my presentation. We have zero budget for military expenditure since 1948. One of Costa Rica's most renowned achievements came in 1987, when it spearheaded peace process in Central America. In that year, former Costa Rican President Oscar Arias was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for designing a peace plan to put an end to the civil wars that were devastating Central America at that time. The plan aimed at free elections, safeguards for human rights, and an end to foreign interference in the country's internal affairs. The plan was approved by Costa Rica, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua. This diplomatic leadership underscored our country's commitment to regional stability and peaceful conflict resolution. Throughout the latter half of the 20th century and nowadays, Costa Rica has continued to strengthen the rule of law and consolidate its democratic system. In the area of foreign policy, the country follows a state policy vis-a-vis a governmental policy. It's a state policy that all governments has followed ever since, based on the following aspects. 1, the defense of democracy, territorial integrity, and national sovereignty. 2, the promotion, protection, and respect of human rights and fundamental freedoms. 3, the promotion of peace, disarmament, and national, regional, and global security. 4, the strengthening of international law and the development of effective multilateralism. And 5, the promotion of sustainable development and political coordination and representation in international environmental negotiations, with particular focus on climate action and ocean protection. These elements are interlinked and correspond to the same values and principles that permeate our society and our national policies. Through the implementation of actions in these all areas, the country vindicates its interest before the world and its identity as a green, democratic, and Pacific country. At the bilateral level, I can summarize our policy saying that, aware of the global and local challenges, we have articulated a frank dialogue with countries that historically have supported Costa Rica's interests, such as the liberal democracies of the European Union and the Western Hemisphere. And recently, we have strengthened our bilateral relations with Asia and the Middle East. These are two strategic, competitive, innovative regions willing to build bridges regardless of geographical distances. I would now like to focus on the declaration of a perpetual, active, and unarmed neutrality of Costa Rica and its implications. Costa Rica decided to embrace a model in which disarmament, neutrality, and the human right to peace are directly interlinked. However, there are other models of neutrality in the world. The absence of a military component is not indispensable to be a neutral state. A country can have an army and be neutral like Austria, or be demilitarized without having a policy of neutrality. Having said that, let us now concentrate on the model of my country. As I mentioned before, Costa Rica was the first country in the world that decided to dissolve the army on the 1st of December 1948. The army was abolished after the end of the Civil War of 1948. On that day, Figueres, the president or the winner of the small civil war, handed over the military headquarters keys to the then Minister of Education, so that he could turn it into space dedicated to the development of culture and the promotion of history. It became what it is today, the National Museum of Costa Rica. Its proscription was included in Article 12 of the Political Constitution of Costa Rica of 1949, still in force, that reads, I quote, "The army is hereby proscribed as a permanent institution. For the vigilance and preservation of public order, there shall be the necessary police forces. Only by continental agreement or for national defense may military forces be organized. Both shall always be subordinate to the civil power. They may not deliberate nor make demonstrations or statements individually or collectively." End of quote. This decision made it possible to create a climate of confidence and stability in the country after the Civil War, sowed the seed for a stable democracy, and allowed the nation to use its resources for the social development in areas such as education and health instead of weapons. The country's current high human development indexes and its long democracy demonstrate that this pioneering choice was the right one to make. Moreover, after 75 years without an army, we proved that it is possible to live in an unarmed democracy and to be a pacifist nation which resolves its conflicts and external threats by means of international law. The day in commemoration of the abolition of the army is celebrated every 1st of December. Apart from this, in 1983, President Monge declared the perpetual, active, and unarmed neutrality of Costa Rica amid the confrontation of the superpowers in Central America. Subsequently, November 17th was declared the perpetual, active, and unarmed neutrality day of Costa Rica by executive decree. This decision was taken at a critical time when Central America was plagued by violence and war, and with the Cold War scenario in the background. In 1983, the presidential proclamation was enacted and communicated to all states with which Costa Rica had diplomatic relations. On the 17th of November 1983, there was also a ceremony at the National Theater to present the Neutrality Proclamation to the Costa Rican people and the world. The Constitutional Court of Costa Rica determined that this declaration fits within the sources of public international law under the specific modality of the so-called unilateral acts, which are those legal acts dictated by a single state in its international relations and which entail legal consequences. According to the court, quote, the observance of this type of promises also depends on the good faith compliance of the state itself with its terms, being that it can be invoked in its favor by other subjects of international public law before the organs and instances in charge of ensuring its compliance, end of quote. Under these considerations, it determined that the proclamation of perpetual, active, and unarmed neutrality, quote, is an unilateral promise of Costa Rica in the international concert that came to develop the constitutional value of peace, and that, consequently, it must be observed in accordance with the Constitution. Therefore, must be observed in good faith in a permanent manner by the Costa Rican government, end of quote. The presidential proclamation of 1983 included the rights and duties that Costa Rica would observe as a neutral state. Among the duties are the following, and I quote again. We pledge not to initiate war, not to use force, including any military threat or retaliation, not to participate in a war between third states, to effectively defend our neutrality and independence with all possible material, legal, political, and moral resources, and to pursue a foreign policy of neutrality so as not to become involved in any actual or apparent armed conflict. Furthermore, we pledge to extend our duties as a perpetually neutral state to armed conflicts within states. We also commit ourselves to make every possible effort to prevent the national territory, including airspace and jurisdictional waters, from being used as a base of operations by the parties engaged in a war, not to allow the transport of troops, munitions, or supplies to pass through our territory. We commit ourselves to fight in all forms against the arms race and against the military solution of political conflicts, to maintain the decision not to re-establish the army and to improve the civilian police forces, to continue to base our external defense on the will of our people and on the mechanism of international law that make the principle of collective security as a reality. Apart from that, our rights as a neutral state include, quote, the exercise of fundamental right of the state to choose our political, economic, social, and cultural system, to reject any attempt to violate this fundamental right of our people, to defend our peace, our freedom, and our democracy with unwavering determination, to develop a policy of pluralistic relations in the international arena, to participate in and comply with the commitments acquired in the United Nations, the Organization of American States, and those international organizations which peace, friendship, and cooperation objectives are compatible with our perpetual neutrality. End of quote. This proclamation states that Costa Rica's demilitarization, unilateral disarmament, and neutrality are compatible with the United Nations Charter, the Charter of the Organization of American States, and the TIAR, Special Defense Treaty of the Continent of the Americas. These are the main norms and mechanisms of international law on which the country relies for its external security. At the national level, the country relies on policy corps that maintain security and order. Moreover, the proclamation acknowledges that Costa Rica's neutrality has three characteristics. It is perpetual, active, and non-armed. Let me elaborate. It is perpetual as a non-transitory. It shall be practiced in the face of all warlike conflicts affecting other states. It is active. It does not mean impartiality in the ideological or political fields. This is compatible with the rights of the country as a member of the United Nations, Organization of American States, or the TIAR, in all matters related to the preservation of international peace and security, as well as to activities aimed at the peaceful settlement of disputes, the achievement of more just economic and social order, and the promotion and respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. And non-armed, as we already said, it stipulated that the external security of the country depends on the free will of its people, the norms of international law, and the systems of collective security to which it is a party, none of which requires the maintenance of the army as a permanent institution, nor the use of force by Costa Rica in the resolution of military conflicts confronting other states. As you can see, our non-armed neutrality allows us to convey our values and ideological and political ideas in our foreign policy, and even serves us to exercise more vigorously than other countries the defense of the right of nations to live in peace and security, and the defense of human rights and fundamental freedoms, and to advocate for disarmament and non-proliferation initiatives. Let me give you just a couple of examples. It was not by a coincidence that Costa Rica was among the 7 states that presented a resolution at the UN that called for multilateral negotiations on an arms trade treaty that finally led to the open of signature of the treaty in 2013. Neither was that in 2017. Costa Rica was chosen to chair and successfully led the negotiations in the UN that led to the approval of the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. The country also has the honor to be the host country of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights and other international organizations. And in view of the current complex geopolitical context, Costa Rica did not remain silent regarding the situation in Ukraine or Gaza. Costa Rica deplored in the strongest terms the military aggression against Ukraine in violation of the Charter of the organization, and reaffirmed its commitment to sovereignty, independence, unity, and national integrity of Ukraine, with its internationally recognized borders, which extend to its territorial waters. It also reiterated the need for the Russian Federation to immediately, completely, and unconditionally withdraw all its military forces from the territory of Ukraine within its international recognized borders and for the cessation of hostilities. And in regard to the situation in Gaza, the country recently expressed its support to the Security Council Resolution 2024-253, adopted on March 25, 2024, which called for an immediate ceasefire during Ramadan, leading to a sustained ceasefire, as well as the immediate release of all hostages, unimpeded access to humanitarian aid, strengthened protection of civilians throughout the Gaza Strip, and respect by the parties to their obligations under international law. Costa Rica also condemned the recent attacks of Iran to Israel. Nevertheless, I also have to say that the implementation of neutrality has had a few setbacks. In the 2002-2006 National Administration, the 2002-2006 National Administration included the country on a list of states that supported the U.S. military action in Iraq in 2003, which was not endorsed by the United Nations Security Council. This meant a setback in the discourse of perpetual neutrality and generated criticism. Subsequently, the case was reviewed by our constitutional chamber, which declared unconstitutional the agreement of the executive branch that supported the invasion and led to the reversal of that decision. Overall, however, the implementation of the model has been successful. In 2014, Costa Rica's neutrality was even reinforced when a new proclamation was enacted through a law of November 21, 2014, entitled Proclamation of Peace as a Human Right and of Costa Rica as a neutral country. Article 2 of that law indicates, quote, "Peace is a fundamental human right. The state shall promote, defend, and guarantee peace by all possible means and through the application of its active neutrality in conflicts between states and internally within countries, according to the provisions of international treaties, their principles and purposes, and the law. Costa Rica is neutral before all international armed conflicts, and therefore all armed conflicts within other states, in accordance with the provisions of this law and international law. The installation in national territory of any industry for the manufacture of weapons of war is prohibited." To summarize, I can say that Costa Rica has set a precedent in diplomacy and international law by voluntarily abolition of its army 75 years ago, and by its particular model of neutrality, which last year commemorated its 40th anniversary. This provided a unique example for diplomacy and has allowed the country to gain credibility before the world to advocate for disarmament and non-proliferation initiatives, for the reduction of the investment in armament, for the respect of human rights, for the peaceful settlement of disputes, and the respect of international law in general. I would like to finish this lecture by reading an extract of the Presidential Proclamation on Perpetual Active and Unarmed Neutrality of Costa Rica of '83, which includes elements of the Costa Rican idiosyncrasy, which I consider still valid in guiding its foreign policy. Quote, "Costa Rica knows that human beings are getting closer and closer to the dilemma of uniting peacefully around a true right of peoples, or destroying the whole civilization built in millennia, destroying themselves in the hecatomb. The political yearning of the Costa Rican people is to contribute in a practical manner to the conquest of peace for mankind. End of quote. The insanity of war, the unbridled armamentism and generalized violence do not discourage us. In the search for the ideal, we know how to draw hope from despair, because the power of common sense or the will and of the morality unleashes man's spiritual energy. Thank you. Not too long.
Thank you very much, Minister, for this broad overview about Costa Rican foreign policy and specifically the focus to this really unique policy of permanent neutrality. I would like to start with a few questions, and then I will give the floor to you, to the audience. You know, you have mentioned the specificity of this permanent neutrality, but there is even another specificity of your ministry. You are the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship. And this is something unique as well in the titles, at least, of foreign ministers around the world. Maybe you can tell us why you have this
I'm missing
addition.
an archbishop here.
Yeah.
It's a historical remnants in the Constitution. We have a Constitution that states that the official religion of the state is the Catholic religion. Nevertheless, there is freedom of belief and freedom of practicing any religion, which we have always respected. In the past, we had a direction of worship at the ministry that took care of the churches and took care of the official relationships between church and the state. That doesn't apply anymore. The direction does not exist. What remains is a registry of religious associations existing in the country that we verify for formal purposes like immigration permits and labor permits of foreign religious people serving those associations. Mm. So my people insist in using it. I have said you should delete it from the title, but that's the history.
Thank you very much. Well, it maybe also shows this peace spirit that you have in your country, and you want to settle conflicts peacefully. So maybe it is also a historical little point in the title. I would like to ask you as well, you mentioned a lot about, the neutrality, but you have also challenges with the neutrality, and one also challenges that Costa Rica has certainly is an issue that is linked also with relations with neighboring countries is migration. And you have a lot of migrants going through Costa Rica. You have coming from Nicaragua. This is a growing problem in also Europe, in countries similar size, also like Costa Rica. How is Costa Rica dealing with this problem?
I believe that you have in Austria about 18% of your population of immigrants, and we have about 20%. Of the 5.2 million inhabitants we have, approximately 1 million are recent immigrants. 20% of the births in our clinics are from Nicaraguan mothers, and 20% of the prisoners in our jails are from Nicaragua. So the statistic is consistent in that number. Yes, we have two main phenomena regarding immigration. One is north to Costa Rica, from Nicaragua to Costa Rica. There we have strong immigration for Nicaraguans, especially since 2018, when the violence started in the streets of Managua. And Cubans that come through Nicaragua to Costa Rica, there we have about 250,000 pending requests for refugee status or asylum, as you call it here, which we are processing and trying to integrate this recent wave into our economy. But not only that, we have a flow from south to north, where Panama delivers to ourselves in our southern border 600,000 immigrants per year, ranging in a daily rate between 2,000 and 4,000. Those are coming from the south. They cross the Darien jungle between Panama and Colombia. Colombia does not have a register of migrants, so that it is as from Panama onwards that we start registering who is crossing the continent. Mm-hmm. We don't know how many die, how many commit suicide, or how many children are thrown in the rivers of the jungle. Those are, from those 600,000, about 67% are from Venezuela, 10% from Colombia, 10% from Ecuador, but also from Haiti. And you have 5% from China that come through Ecuador, and even from Afghanistan. We have people that shows you that the human trade activity, the criminal human trade activity is taking place between the continents, bringing Middle East and African people to South America so they can march all the way up to the American border. For that phenomena, which is of course a crisis on our education, health, and security systems, we have stated that we have not caused the problem, we're trying to solve it, and therefore we need international financial assistance, because it's an international problem. On the table of a solution should sit the countries of origin of the problem, the countries of transit like ourselves, but also the countries of final destination, the US. That has not been achieved yet, to sit all together on a table. Meanwhile, we have established a humanitarian corridor between Panama and Costa Rica, so that we coordinate and secure passage with psychological assistance and medical assistance from the Darien jungle all the way to the Nicaraguan border, coordinating Panama and Costa Rica, the flow of these persons through our territories. Yes, the ACNUR in English is the United Nations Agency for Refugees. Yes, and the OIM, the Organization of International Migrations, are present, support partially our activities. There are European donors and the US that fund them, and somehow there is a partial international assistance on that. Furthermore, Spain, Canada, and the US have established centers for regular mobility in Colombia, Costa Rica, and Guatemala, where these persons can apply for regular and legal immigration into the US, Canada, or Spain, and their documents would be processed so they don't have to continue their way, but apply and wait where they are. This have partially functioned. About 3,000 people have qualified under that program. It's very little in comparison to the mass immigration that we have, but it's a grain in the solution.
Thank you very much. It is a problem that will probably continue and will be a challenge for us here and for you in your country as well. But another topic that you are very active and you mentioned also during your talk is how you want to contribute to a peaceful settlement of conflict is by pushing for disarmament. And you are very active in the non-proliferation area. In disarmament, you were one of the core members of countries in the treaty on prohibition of nuclear weapons, like Austria, member of the core group in this important treaty. You will participate in Monday in a very big conference in Vienna, the Vienna Conference on Autonomous Weapons System and the Challenges of Regulation. We are surrounded by more and more weapons, we have the impression, with the wars that are spreading, one could say, around us. What is maybe you can give us an insight about already your talk on Monday, or your contribution, but how can we really support that we have more disarmament instead of armament?
Well, yes, on Monday we will discuss here in Vienna internationally the development or the regulation of the so-called autonomous weapons, where you give the charge to a machine with artificial intelligence to decide which human to kill or not to kill. And the machine has the assignment to judge and act. You cannot distinguish maybe a person that surrenders. How will the machine distinguish if he's an active soldier or a soldier surrendering, or he's a civilian or a soldier? So there are legal, ethical aspects in that, and technical aspects on how to regulate. And we're striving, of course, for an international agreement that addresses the dangers and regulates the production and application of such armament.
I think it's a very important topic, and we're happy that you are contributing and participating. For those in the audience who are interested.
And Austria shares those thoughts and concerns.
We support it as well.
We together cooperate very much in pushing it through.
Absolutely. So you can all participate also online in the conference on Monday if you would like. I'll pass the floor afterwards to you on this subject. Yes, we are coming to the end of my questions. I would like to pass now the floor to the audience. I saw in the first row, lady, if you'd like to ask a question, please. The floor is yours.
The microphone is coming.
Thank you so much. Minister, my name is Yasmin Espinosa. I'm originally from Chile. It's a true honor for me to have you here, and I would like to start by thanking the Diplomatic Academy for this wonderful opportunity. I'm also a representative for IANSA, the International Action Network on Small Arms, and I had worked in Amnesty International, so a lot of what you explained I had seen firsthand. I would like to start by a small comment and then a very small question. First, I would like to highlight what you mentioned in your presentation regarding the relevant role that Costa Rica had played in promoting peace through disarmament. This is something that I think Costa Rica had become an example for middle states in terms of the ability to promote peace through disarmament and nuclear non-proliferation. I saw it myself through the ATT process, as well as the latest treaty on nuclear disarmament. So this is something that I would like to congratulate, and the role that you had played also with civil society organizations. The question that I have has to do with the topic that you mentioned on Gaza. One of the challenges that had been present right now is regarding certain countries within the EU and also the United States that is still sending weapons to the state of Israel, despite the serious claims in terms of war crimes that are supposedly being committed in the context of the Gaza war. In this case, is Costa Rica planning to play an active role in promoting some measures to try to convince some countries within the EU and also the United States to create dialogue to try to stop the sending of more weapons in a conflict that is starting to become like to get very, very, very serious consequences in terms of the humanitarian impact. Thank you very much, and I will be happy to see you on Monday too. I'm going to the conference as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, the evidence is the contrary from what you're saying. I mean, the U.S. just approved a multi-million budget to send arms not only for the Ukraine and Gaza wars, but also for the other part of the world, in Indochina. Of course, if we pledge for a ceasefire, if we want this to de-escalate, it's logical that such armament race is not within that line. Nevertheless, it's a conflict that is 14,000 kilometers away from ourselves, and we are not in the front line pledging for that, so we cannot decide for other countries what they do. We are very much committed in helping for a peaceful and amicable solution and we speak loud, we speak with all friends, we discuss the matter in every bilateral, all multilateral meeting, and thereby try to convince the others to go in that line.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
Wow.
Maybe this gentleman,
Open
and then
exam.
we go to the right.
Thank you very much, Minister, for explaining your type of neutrality. I think this is not enough known in Austria, even amongst experts. I personally sympathize very much with this pacifist, unarmed neutrality, but I would like to challenge it with what you usually read, at least in Central Europe or in Europe, about neutrality and being armed or unarmed. There's a saying, even if every country disarms, it's a neutral which can only disarm at the end, and I will explain. Other countries are protected by collective defense arrangements, bilateral defense arrangements, but the neutral countries automatically are not being defended if their status of country, including neutrality, is attacked. What would you say to this saying that it's a neutral who can disarm at the end because nobody would come to its help? Or is it enough, or would it be enough if you will be attacked by a neighbor or some countries from further away, if you had a good status in the United Nations or in your regional political arrangements? Thank you.
Well, our model is based on Article 52 of the Charter of the United Nations that allows countries to belong to a regional or universal collective security system. In our specific case, we have the Organization of American States with its Tratado Interamericano de Asistencia Recíproca, Inter-American Treaty of Reciprocal Assistance, which is designed as the collective regional defense system, and any country could call it up if it's a victim of aggression, on one side. And on the other side, we have the famous non-working Security Council in Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. Costa Rica is basing its defense on those systems and the International Court of Justice. When Nicaragua pretended 15 years ago to alter our border by making a new canal in the river that divides the countries and trying to take for themselves part of our territory in order to change the maritime line of the border, We had to present 4 claims before The Hague, the International Court of Justice, which we won, and Nicaragua voluntarily accepted the judgment and refrained. It's a selfish decision, yes. I don't help you, but expect you to help me if I'm attacked. Yes? Now, if everybody is disarmed and neutral, no wars would occur. Panama copied our model about 10, 15 years ago, 20, and dismantled its armed forces as well. It's a huge theoretical and practical discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, here.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, I have a twofold question. First, how does the unique geopolitical location of your country influence this perception of permanent neutrality? And second, permanent doesn't mean not dynamic. Seeing what happened in Nicaragua, but also in other countries, especially in South America, also Latin America, how do coups, where especially the army is involved, change your dynamic understanding of the neutrality in your country?
It's a neutrality for armed conflicts. It does not mean a neutral policy or opinion towards conflicts developing. We respect fully the right of every society to organize and operate the way they wish, unless there is a consistent, permanent, gross violation of human rights. There, we feel, as in international law, fully entitled to comment and take actions to try to correct and protect the civilians of these gross violations for human rights, which is the case in Nicaragua, is the case in Cuba, and is the case in Venezuela mainly. There, we exercise active politics towards a change of that. Particularly, the election process in Venezuela is now closely being observed with preoccupation, of course, because Venezuelans need a free, transparent, and a complete regular process of election, which has not been possible yet.
Thank you very much. Please, gentleman there.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your talk. I found it very interesting and inspiring. My name is Johannes. I'm a second-year MI student here at the Academy. I wanted to ask you, to what extent does Costa Rica's neutrality rely on the primacy of the United States in your hemisphere? Leading on from the gentleman's question, if the US wasn't there, could Costa Rica be neutral?
Yes, but of course the good relationships with the U.S. and I must say with Colombia give tranquility to the country. We depend on good friends, and we still have good friends. Not only those countries. We have an alliance for development in democracy called ADD with the Dominican Republic, Panama, and Ecuador, for instance. Furthermore, we have good democratic countries in the south, as is Uruguay and Paraguay. So we have a network of countries with which we work together. We consult even public statements regarding foreign policy, and many times do them together, and would hope that in the worst case scenario, which can only be imagined by an aggression of Nicaragua, they have 50 Russian tanks, they have permanent military Russian advisors, they have a satellite communication station of Russia in Managua, and permanent visits of the highest authorities of Iran and Russia and China. Nicaragua and Venezuela have decided to develop themselves, not with the Western countries, not with the like-minded countries like Austria, Costa Rica, but with these others I have mentioned. But there is no reason for an aggression, no evident reason, unless to provoke an international conflict to divert political internal matters. But that has not happened during the last 200 years.
Thank you very much. Please.
And Austria, maybe Austria helps us out.
First of all, thank you so much for your talk. My name is Sofia, and I've lived in Costa Rica for the past 4 years. I'm here from Austria. You mentioned the different flows of immigrants from Cuba, from Nicaragua, and you also mentioned the really good relationship with the US. Now, having lived on the coast of Costa Rica, I want to ask you, don't you see a problem with US immigrants as well, jacking up the prices on the coast, locals not being able to afford properties anymore, food getting really expensive? How are the flows of immigration from Nicaragua and Cuba and so on a problem, but US immigration is not? And are there any plans to handle that type of immigration?
You might be thinking on this part of the population that of retirees, retired people that come down, establish themselves, have nothing to do but to take a look to the waves and the sand and the beach.
And bring money, no?
And drink a bit of much beer or smoke a bit of much stuff and therefore cause problems. Like in Nosara, in Samara, in Malpaís, in Cahuita, in Puerto Viejo. The country has been so attractive that it's also attracting populations from the US, from Canada, and from Europe. Mm. You can speak Italian, German, French, and English, of course, mainly at the touristic coastal sites. No, we have not stopped the immigration laws. They are open. We have immigrant status as an investor with $150,000 that you buy an apartment. You can apply for an investment visa, or as a student, or as an entrepreneur, or because of a family relocation. Those communities cause a problem when they concentrate among themselves very much. When I was a lawyer, and I was a German-speaking lawyer there, so I had as clients Germans, Austrians, and Swiss, most problems and fights were among themselves, and not one investor with a Costa Rican. Mm-hmm. Because of the mentality, you solve problems here at court. Mm. Our people tend more to try to negotiate out the solution of a problem, are more for an agreement. I think that should be addressed somehow differently by enforcement of law. If they don't behave, they should confront the law, and if it's a crime, accept the consequences.
Thank you. Please, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for this very interesting lecture. I'm a student here as well at the Diplomatic Academy. I had a question regarding neutrality and disarmaments that you've mentioned a few times. Today in the world, most of the armed conflicts in the world are not necessarily between states, but between non-state actors. And with a lot of weapons also being within those kind of entities. So when we consider questions of disarmament, how can we tackle it in that way as well? Especially when we consider a policy of neutrality regarding armed conflict that does not have armed forces, how can we then consider possibly a neutrality and without armed forces around the world if most of the conflicts and a lot of the weapons that are the armament that is around the world is in the hands of non-state actors that do not necessarily abide by the laws that have been established on the international stage?
That's a problem for international law. The non-state actors, or not being a subject of international law, and therefore not having accountability as a subject of international law, like Hamas, for instance. So it's a huge challenge of action and omission. Who is responsible for letting a non-state actor behave the way they behave? A state is composed mainly by, traditionally international law, by three elements: government, people, and territory. Usually, if you do not reunite these elements, you don't have a state. There are exceptions, like the Sovereign Order of Malta, for instance. Has a government, has no people, and no territory, but is a subject of international law. You cannot bring a claim before the International Court of Justice against Hamas, for instance. But if you consider that Israel is an occupying power, could be against Israel. Or if you consider that it's should be under the control of the Organization to Free Palestine, that would be liable. But it's very difficult. It's one of the challenges the system has now. No easy answer.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's lecture. We have touched upon many fascinating topics, ending by the non-state actors, artificial intelligence, permanent neutrality, migration, well, a lot of subjects. Thank you very much, Minister, for taking the time to speak to us, to exchange, and we wish you a very pleasant time in Vienna and a productive conference next week also, where you participate in Vienna on Monday and Tuesday. Thank you very much for coming.
Very pleased being here, and thank you so much.